United States officials claim the US made plans to abduct and kill Julian Assange. A Yahoo News investigation found the CIA created a plan in 2017 to kidnap the WikiLeaks founder, an Australian citizen, while he was holed up in the Ecuadorian embassy in London. According to several unnamed former US officials, the Trump administration also requested the agency explore how it could assassinate Assange. The officials say former CIA Director Mike Pompeo was seeking revenge on Assange after he published details about US activities overseas and unlawful mass surveillance. Assange's lawyers told Yahoo News that reported actions are shocking and that Assange has been targeted simply for publishing truthful information. Assange is being held in a London prison as UK courts decide on a US request to extradite him. He's accused of helping a whistleblower break into a classified...
Individuals such as Julian Assange and Edward Snowden seek to use that information to make a name for themselves. As long as they make a splash, they care nothing about the lives they put at risk or the damage they cause to national security. WikiLeaks walks like a hostile intelligence service and talks like a hostile intelligence service, and has encouraged its followers to find jobs at the CIA in order to obtain intelligence. It's time to call out WikiLeaks for what it really is: a non-state hostile intelligence service often abetted by state actors like Russia. In January of this year, our intelligence community determined that Russian military intelligence, the GRU, had used WikiLeaks to release data of U.S. victims that the GRU had obtained through cyber operations against the Democratic National Committee. And the report also found that Russia's primary propaganda outlet, RT, has actively collaborated with WikiLeaks. Assange and his ilk make common cause with dictators today. Yes, they try unsuccessfully to cloak themselves and their actions in the language of liberty and privacy, but in reality, they champion nothing but their own celebrity. Their currency is clickbait, their moral compass non-existent, their mission, personal self-aggrandizement through destruction of Western values. They do not care about the causes of the people they claim to represent. If they did, they would focus instead on autocratic regimes in this world that actually suppress free speech and dissent. Instead, they choose to exploit the legitimate secrets of democratic governments, which has, so far...
When I was a cadet, what's the cadet motto at West Point? You will not lie, cheat, or steal, or tolerate those who do. I was the CIA director. We lied, we cheated, we stole. It was like... We had entire training courses. It reminds you of the glory of the American experiment.
From the very day that Sweden announced that they did in fact want to question him, he has asked for Sweden to send its prosecutor to London and to question him here, as they have done with an alleged serial killer. Why have they not done so? Assange has asked, and now the Ecuador government has asked, for an assurance that if Assange returns to Sweden, that he will not be extradited from Sweden to the United States to face a secret indictment drawn up by a secret grand jury under the rubric in papers released last week, released by the US State Department itself, which declares Assange to be an enemy of the United States. Their words, not mine, and with capital letters too. You thought enemy of the state was just a movie. In fact, Julian Assange is officially, capital letters, an enemy of the United States. So why will Sweden not give an assurance that a man not charged but wanted for questioning about allegations of sexual assault which morphed into allegations of rape, why will they not give such an assurance?
Hey everyone, good evening. It's Saturday night here in China. Time check 9:05 Beijing time. And without further ado, I'm bringing Cyrus Jansen onto the program with me. Cyrus, great to see you. Good morning to you there in North America. What a pleasure it is to have you and me on the same screen here finally once again. I think we're going to do this a little bit more often. We talked about that before the show.
We have, absolutely. Alex, always a pleasure to see you, and thank you to everybody for tuning in. We've got an important show today because there is so many things developing in geopolitics. Alex, I know you and I were chatting, things are turning so fast right now. So many things are happening around the world. I mean, pick a part of the world. There's a massive geopolitical story that's unfolding. So we said, hey, we need to jump in a live stream here and just hash it out. Let's talk about it. And as always, a pleasure to join you. Very happy to be here.
Thank you. Thank you. I mean, you've heard Mike Pompeo there at the start of the program try to tell us all that it is about honesty and moving forward, and how terrible a man Julian Assange is. Well, fast forward a few years later, I don't believe any of it, what the Americans are doing here. This is a man they are persecuting to drag all the way to America to basically die. There is no different way to explain what is happening. This is a gentleman that has not been formally charged. He's been indicted on 18 counts, and I have those notes with me to share them with the viewers. Yeah. But I've been following this Assange story, as you have, and other individuals that are very similar to this type of persecution. I mean, it's a pretty troubling world when we can't get the truth out of our own governments. And I know the people in the chat box are going to go crazy here too. This is a very important week here. And we could see a man that is trying to get the word out to us and say, hey, there's something fundamentally wrong. And here's what your governments are doing.
Yeah. Alex, what's really interesting here is, being back in North America and seeing the life that we have here, there's a very large disconnect with the general population and now the trust in the government right now. I mean, there's no doubt about it. I mean, again, this is not me being anti-democratic, but the United States is a flawed democracy. There is some massive problems going on right now. There's a huge lack of accountability inside of our government. And I think if you talk to the average American, really across the board, it doesn't matter if they're Republican or Democrat, you were to ask them, do you believe in your government? Do you have trust in your government? The resounding answer that you will receive from the vast majority of people will be no. And we've had, these, especially everything is accelerated really in the last 4 to 5 years. Of course, the handling of COVID and, how that had transpired, that had caused a lot of division inside, especially in the United States. But as we're just seeing, I mean, that clip from Michael Pompeo of the we lied, we cheated, we stole, that of course has now been watched by millions of times. It's really a clip I'm sure that he just really regrets in his life of making that comment. And it really just shows you the importance of, when you're a government official, every moment that you're speaking, could potentially be recorded, and that could be used against you at any point in the future. And I think, for example, that's probably the video that has caused him not to run for presidency or any other government position, because his accountability has been compromised. I mean, when you come out and just bluntly say the reality that we all know, and it's not like Americans were surprised by that comment. We know damn well that that's how the government functions. But it's just amazing to have that sound clip and to have that, and that really just is a massive stain on his resume, and it's a massive stain on him as a person and character, because what can we trust, right? If you're coming out speaking in front of a group of Americans, and Alex, look at that clip again. I mean, you hear the people in the crowd, kind of laughing, and it's so awkward, because what else are we going to do? Like, we kind of know that. It's almost like a sad laugh, like, oh yeah, that's true. You lied, you cheated, you stole. I guess the joke's on us, because that's we're the ones being lied against. So it's what's really difficult though, Alex, is, again, as we're kind of looking at it more from the macro perspective, right? The geopolitics around the world. There's a large disconnect there, because people and countries around the world are losing respect for the United States on the international stage. And it is because of the double standards. It is because of, this America First policy, where it's our way or the highway. Either you buy into this or you are out, and you are public enemy number one. And, we act very much on the international stage as a bully. And, that's just, it's not me being anti-American. It's just, I'm trying to be very truthful here. I'm just speaking very objectively. That's how many countries see it. And I mean, we don't even have to talk about, some of our biggest adversaries, some like a country like Russia, or, a strategic rival in China. It's look at Canada. I mean, that I lived in Canada for 5 years. I mean, Canadians' perception of America has gone downhill in the last 7-8 years. I mean, it's, as being Canadian yourself, growing up, I'm sure, Canadians generally kind of always look at America as the big brother. Hey, you're my big brother. You're the big protector. We always kind of look to you for leadership. And Canadians are left scratching their head and like, wow, what is going on in the United States? What is going on with your political system? Of course, Canada under, probably one of the worst prime ministers in history as well. So, they're not really a shining star either. So yeah, there's just so many more layers to this that we can uncover. But it really just comes down to this double standards and hypocrisy that is really compromising our reputation on an international level.
Yeah, I mean, I'm going to echo that. But once again, Canada is even having its issues too, and a lot of collective West countries here in general. This whole feeling of seeing, guys like Pompeo that had an extremely important position in the last administration come out there, go on a road show, kind of laugh about it. These are people's lives that they have changed. These are, situations that have really harmed people's lives moving forward. And I'm not just talking about people like Julian Assange, but the average person that is, they're back against the wall. Let's say they have to fight a court case. If you're someone in the US, okay, and I'm not picking on America here, but I have watched even YouTubers that have had to defend themselves from coming out, speaking out, saying, hey, I don't think this is right, get slammed with a frivolous lawsuit, $300,000 to $400,000 later after they're wiped out financially.
Right.
What do? They try to pick up the pieces after that. And it's a system that I think is fundamentally flawed.
Right.
Being here now in China, going on 4 years now, I don't see these things here. I don't witness these things here. I get told, oh, Alex, it's got to be terrible out there. The air is bad. It's not just the air. It's, the rule of law. I have not seen an altercation since I've been here 4 years. Not one single altercation with anyone. In fact, the Chinese society and most of the people that are communicating, and of course you're going to have these instances where people do get into arguments and fights and stuff like that, of course.
Yeah.
But I'm going to say the average person respects each other here, and to move forward, there's not this us against them or this 1% against them. And there's not these narratives that are moved forward. It's really, and I know some of the viewers might find this hard to hear from a Canadian, but it's a system that is working. And yes, it's going through difficult times right now. China is going through, a lot of high unemployment with youth, but they are aware of that problem. They understand that problem. And to the viewers, and some of the viewers that might not be with China or some of the China haters out there, you need China to win. And why is that? Because if China wins, you win, everybody wins. If China's losing, look out. As we say over here in Asia, if China sneezes, the rest of the world catches a cold. And it's pretty sobering when you put it that way.
Yeah, that's a good point, Alex. I mean, it's an interesting one. When we're talking about geopolitics, and the simple truth is, we live in this global economy. We are so connected, and I think what we really see that is when we look at the Russia-Ukraine conflict as well, right? We've seen, for example, sanctions against Russia and how those have just been completely ineffective. And actually, I made a video a couple of weeks ago talking about how Russia's economy, obviously they've switched to a wartime economy, but it has outgrown and really outpaced all of the G7 countries right now. And it's something that a lot of Western politicians completely miscalculated, but it was something as simple as, Russia actually exports more oil than Saudi Arabia. And that's something that I would almost guarantee you 99.9% of Americans do not know that simple fact, right? We are very much close to Saudi Arabia. We always hear the oil from the Saudis. That's why we have this strategic relationship. But when you have a country like Russia that exports even more oil than the Saudis, they're a vital link to this world economy. I mean, there's, for example, even that oil has been being sold to Europe. India has bought a tremendous amount of that oil, fueling their economic growth. But I completely agree with your comments on China as far as, there is no win for the world if China's economy contracts and it's declining, if China goes into a recession, if China ends up really struggling over the long term. That's not good for anything. And I think what we see there is just a really large disconnect, Alex. I see when I'm here in North America talking to business leaders, talking to people, most importantly, businessmen and women that are actually doing business. These are the type of people that really kind of understand the greater picture. I do find most Americans that have traveled around the world or are doing business and have a little bit more of a, let's call it a higher understanding of the world and how we live, they're much more objective towards China. It's really the blue collar worker that has never left the country that, again, this is not an attack against them. It's just really, their only source for information on these things is, traditional U.S. media. And we've seen a shift from that now over the last few years as well, where, again, similar question. If you ask people, do you trust in the U.S. government? The answer is a resounding no. Do you trust in U.S. media? There was a poll that I found a couple weeks ago. I included it in a video where I think it is the overall trust in media in the United States. So it is the lowest point since this poll began in 1979. So from 1979 to 2023, they've been polling Americans. I believe it's under 30% now. And that's the lowest point in the history. We're talking, 45 years of data. It's now 7 out of 10 Americans have no trust in our media anymore. So there's a lot of issues here. And I think that's, this is why it's important for us to have a YouTube channels, and, why we've seen a big shift as well is that it has gone to the independent content creators, right? You saw, what a great example of Tucker Carlson, going to Russia and vlogging. And I think, you can say what you want about his interview with Vladimir Putin. I know that a lot of people had slammed Tucker Carlson, saying that's just propaganda. That's just there's a reason why Putin invited him strategically to not to the White House, but to the Kremlin, for propaganda purposes. But I thought one of the interesting things that he did was show a grocery visit. He went to the grocery store in Russia, and he said, I'm going to buy a week's worth of food like I would in the United States to feed my family of 4. If we're in the United States, this would probably run $400 to $500 because inflation is through the roof right now in the United States, and cost of everything has just skyrocketed. And, he went to the Russian grocery store and said, wow, I have an entire cart full of groceries. This is what my family would need, and it would cost me around $100. And, so again, critics are going to slam that as propaganda, or is it just simply, wow, I'm looking at it from a different perspective? Even for myself, it was quite amazing to see a Moscow supermarket completely filled with food, everybody going about their day, prices very reasonable, like gives you some perspective on kind of what's going on.
And now that you brought that up, I want to add to that point because, immediately I saw the media go, well, wait a moment here. Russians don't earn like Americans earn. Well, I'll tell you, Russians don't pay taxes like Americans do either. We have a comparison. What they forgot when they said, when they're making this analogy between, Russians and Americans, they said, yeah, but Russians, they only make, between, $900 to $1,200 a month. The average American makes $3,000. Well, did they take into consideration that Russians have pretty much free medical care? Did they take into consideration that it costs 1/10 or maybe 1/20th of the price to get on metro to go to work? Right. Did they take into consideration that this word freedom they use? Yeah, you're free to get on a subway in Philadelphia or Chicago at 10 o'clock at night, but are you free to probably get home without getting harmed? That's a whole other argument. But these are things that they don't bring in. And another thing that was massively missed and is always missed by when they attack these countries is, the cost of living, you can't really compare it because American has such bigger purchasing power. Not true. The other thing is over 93% of Russians own their home. It's a market that has less than 8% mortgages in that country. So these are staggering numbers. And one last thing before I hand it over back to you is Russia is not going back into the Western system. It will not once this conflict is over. I had Scott Ritter on the other day. It's over. Yeah. Flights flying over from Europe over Russian territory, not going to happen. Yeah. Russia opening up the doors to bring German automobiles back in, Not going to happen. They've been replaced by either new energy vehicles out of China or a Chang'an automobile that's pumping out the cars behind me in this city here. It's over. And all these names have been replaced. The trust is broken. And back to you.
Yeah. No, I think, we're seeing a very different world right now. When we started our channels a few years ago, Alex, it was a lot different than what we're seeing right now. And we're certainly moving towards a more fragmented world. We're certainly moving towards a more multipolar world. And I think that days of a unipolar world led by the United States and this, Western-led, world, U.S. world-led order, those days are gone. And I think it's a very similar thing that we're talking about. When you mentioned that when Russia goes back, they're not going to fold back into the Western system. And I think really, if we're going to be very objective about this, I think that even the brightest minds that are, analyzing geopolitics, when we're looking at Russia, they can honestly say, let's go back to the 1990s when Putin actually met with George Bush and actually asked, I want to be included in NATO. And, once the USSR was dissolved and that fell apart, there was a lot better steps that the United States could have gone into to strategically involve Russia in more of the world economy. But the United States made a fundamental error there. They basically, throughout the Cold War era, Russia was always seen as the biggest threat, right? You might got to go back to the Cold War, right? China was nothing. China was not a threat at all to the United States. It was really all, the USSR. The whole Cold War, the Cuban Missile Crisis, all of this was this thought that the Soviet Union was going to, invade or attack or bomb America. That was the threat, of course, that we were told. And so when the USSR was dissolved, there really wasn't a need for NATO anymore. There really wasn't a need for, this Cold War mentality. So, if now instead of the USSR, now we're looking at Russia specifically, there was a lot more things the United States could have done to actually welcome them into the fold, to include them more into the global economy. But what happened is the United States completely treated them the same. They said, even though Russia was now an independent country, it's not USSR, we still treated them as a Cold War enemy, and we still blocked them. And we said, no, you can't join NATO. No, you can't do this. No, we're not going to help you. You're still basically an enemy. So, a lot of that is on the U.S., and I think we handled that incorrectly. There's a brilliant YouTube video by a scholar named, I think it's like How the United States Created Vladimir Putin. And it really goes through that whole history on there. It might be even worth doing a YouTube video about kind of sharing that history. But again, this is a strategic error that we had made, and now we are seeing really this. 30 years later, we are seeing the fact that, man, again, we're now have shifted to a multipolar world. And I think again, kind of going back to the main topic here, talking about Julian Assange and these double standards that we're seeing, the hypocrisy, it's going to be very difficult for the United States to gain back its reputation as being the ethical one, being we are the country with superior morals, and we have this moral authority, that we need to operate. This is the thing that was really interesting. As I made a video about Jimmy Lai in Hong Kong. We can talk about that a little bit later on. But he had pleaded, the United States, you need to come and intervene in China and use your moral authority. That message just does not really resonate with a lot of people around the world. When you see our actions and you see what the U.S. government and kind of our foreign policy and how we operate around the world, it just simply does not check out. And we have an incredible credibility problem right now inside the United States, and it's most especially with our foreign policy.
Here's an interesting comment that I decided to bring up on the chat for us to have a look at here. I think that's directed at us.
Oh yeah, that definitely is, and I'm happy to can address that. You want to start, or I'll take it. I would love to talk about this.
I'm going to let you have a sip and warm up because I'm going to add on this one. So this is by and Peru So Chorus. These two guys hate democracies and the West. This hatred drives them crazy. I'm going to use the example of the internet. In 1996, it was the first time that I sat down online and actually got connected to the world and discovered that there was a world that I was very unfamiliar with. I was told one thing, but other things were going on in the world. And ever since that date, I just started to travel and travel throughout the world. And I went to very important zones that I felt played an integral part of my life. Watching the breakup of Yugoslavia, I watched that on my television screens for years, being paraded by told that the Americans and NATO are going to save the world by breaking up Yugoslavia. And I felt, that it would be my duty to actually go out and explore the world and find out what's really going on there. And I started to discover what I was either reading or being propagandized in my own country by my media was not what I was seeing with my own eyes. And it started to branch out. And lo and behold, 100 countries later, and living outside of my own country than I've actually lived in my country, didn't make me a person that actually hated a democracy. But it made me understand that, there are fundamental things that our governments are doing that are destroying people's lives. When they're financing the military-industrial complex for the hundreds of billions of dollars, yet seeing 15,000 people on the streets of New York, it's hard to really say that we are white knights rescuing the world. And I am disappointed. There's no hatred. I mean, I have family there. But it's more along the lines of, I think mostly everybody watching this program now clearly knows that the trust in media is gone. The trust in governments have gone. And in the last few years, people's lives have become incredibly difficult. And that comes down to the government policy. And you have to look who's connected to the government policy, beaking those messages back out to you. Well, they do use the media machine. America is great at propaganda. It's the number one propaganda country in the world. I'll pass it over to you, Cyrus.
Yeah, I think, we get this comments a lot on here. And I think what I want people to understand is that it takes a true American patriot to be able to call out your country and to be able to, express these views, because the reality is that if the United States is not being that international leader and we are having these double standards and hypocrisy, it's more me analyzing the simple fact that, hey, there's a reason why Canadians, for example, like, again, when I'm talking about Chinese and Russians, like, let's just go across the border. My wife's Canadian. I lived there for 5 years. My twin boys were born in Canada. I'm very connected to the country of Canada. I mean, I had at a point, and I'm not exaggerating or lying about this, but I was a point where, when we were talking, I meet new people and they're like, "Oh, you're from the U.S. You're not Canadian." Oh, oh man, I can understand why you left the U.S. Welcome to Canada. And it was almost a thing where people started to feel bad for me. And I'm not exaggerating. People were like, "Man, it is so messed up there politically. I can understand why you came to Canada." And the interesting thing is that again, the United States, for many years, we have always been, this shining light to the world. And I think, if you go back, for example, I have a very interesting history is, with my mother. My mother was born in Germany. She was born during World War II. And, growing up in Germany, there was a lot of American GIs still. She was near Frankfurt, Wiesbaden, very big U.S. Army base there still to this day. And, growing up, she told me, when I'm 10, 11 years old, it was always told that if you're in trouble and you can't find a German police officer, you find an American GI. They're good people. They're going to take care of you. They helped us win this war against Hitler in World War II, and that was a necessary war. I mean, that was the United States peak. I mean, that was the war that we won. And that's how we set up this whole the SWIFT system, the whole international order. So the United States at that time, I mean, that was the peak, right? All of Europe looked to America. All of the world looked to America. And again, I'm very pro-American. I think even to this day, I always say this, that no matter where you are in the world, everybody has an American dream. Everybody wants to at least come to America. Everybody wants to, and we still have world-class universities. There's so many positive things about the United States. But again, I saw a comment in here. Somebody said, who is it? Seymour Fact. I'm in Utah. We're seeing growth in homelessness here. We're seeing, when you're looking at America and the plethora of issues that we have, where these very big Democratic majority cities, look at the entire West Coast, the Seattle, San Francisco, LA, Portland, all of these amazing cities have been are overrun with rampant drug problems, unbelievable amount of homelessness. The border on the south is completely open. There's so many, there's a plethora of issues that are happening inside of this country. And there's nothing wrong with pointing that out or simply talking about this. And so, again, I think that what we really have to understand is the fact that it really takes somebody that is patriotic and someone that really cares about the system and the government to actually speak about it and to actually call them out. And, I'm not going to pretend that, oh, wow, America is just the most amazing thing ever. We've got free speech here. Give me a break. We can talk about free speech and how people are canceled left, right, and center. We've seen a plethora of that, most especially since this new war in Gaza has happened. And, some very big people that have, for example, I think Alex and I were talking about this earlier in the week. WeiWei, he is a famous Chinese artist. He's famous because he is, against China. He's not actually famous for his artwork. He's more famous for being an outspoken critic of China. Here you go. Now all of a sudden, a few months ago, he said, hey, what's going on in Gaza is ridiculous. I cannot support this. Immediately, his art shows canceled. Mainstream media appearances canceled. This guy's been canceled. And he came out and said, oh my gosh, the censorship and the free speech in America, it's no different than China. And I'm like, wow, that is a bold statement, Alex, when you have a guy who's basically made his entire career off of defecting from China, and basically moving away and being an outspoken critic of Beijing. Hey, that's fine. That's how he wants to position himself. But he realizes that the grass is not always greener on the other side. And, again, I'm not going to argue that, which side is worse. Certainly, I know that China censors a lot more heavily than the United States. We're not going to deny that. But there is an interesting thing when, you see this guy, again, over off of, here's his London exhibition called off over an Israel social media post. Another brilliant man, Mehdi Hassan, he had a television show on, I think it was MSNBC, the Mehdi Hassan show. He is Muslim, his background. He has been a very staunch critic of what's happening in Gaza. Immediately canceled. That show has been canceled, and now he has moved over to The Guardian. He just published his first article on The Guardian this week because he's been canceled elsewhere. So I think it's just really important to understand what's going on in media today, what's going on with these Western governments. And again, it's not like I'm anti-democratic. I'm going to be voting in this year's election here in the United States. It's an important election. But I also want people to understand that this is really important for people to understand. There is a massive level of frustration amongst the vast majority of Americans that here we are in 2024, and we're having Joe Biden and Donald Trump again. In my opinion, neither of them are qualified to run this country. I don't think that, my gosh, we have 360 million Americans in this country, and we can't find two better candidates than these two. There is a plethora, and I guarantee you the vast majority of Americans are extremely frustrated with this. And I'll leave you on one point. I know I'm going off on a tangent, Alex, give it back to you. Yeah. But, we always criticize China for being a one-party state. We only have one additional party. We're a two-party state, and many people feel handcuffed because, again, like myself, I don't know who I'm going to vote for. Out of those two, I almost like, do I really even want to vote? And that's what many Americans feel. So it's not like, oh my gosh, wow, we have a democracy. Yes, we get to vote in an election. I'm so grateful for this. Yeah, we have a choice between bad and bad. And that's the honest truth. And so, is that really better? Or is it better to have a system of meritocracy where, you can have competent leaders put in and people that actually prove themselves? Last thing, and then I'll let back to you. Kamala Harris has got to be one of the worst politicians I've ever seen. Every time she opens her mouth, I'm just like, how is this the image that we're projecting to the world? Like, she can't even logically speak about things. And it's sad, Alex. And again, that's where it goes back. I know we've taken a long time to answer this question, but again, sure, it's out of a love for America and out of a, I'm a patriotic American. I was born here. I've moved back to America because my family's here. My mother and father are here. My sister's here. My family, my aunts, my uncles, my cousins. I want to be closer to my family. That's why we moved back to the United States. I'm very bullish about America. I want it to work in the long term. And that's why we have YouTube channels. That's why we talk about this stuff.
I mean, thank you for answering that. I couldn't have done it better. You did a great job of that. Thanks, Cyrus. I mean, we do compare governments, and this is why this Assange is so important. And we'll talk about his 170 years potential prison term in a moment. But I just want to add to what you're saying, about democracies and governments. There's a big misunderstanding about China. Most people out there don't really understand how the politics work over here. And there's one word, it's called accountability. And most people, and I think the average person that is watching doesn't understand how the political setup is here, and maybe take some time to actually find out what it's all about. In fact, there are some similarities. They have the NPC and the CPPCC, where basically the CPPCC is the House, like the United States, and the NPC is like the Senate. But within that Senate, 30% are scholars or experts or doctors or whatever, and it's when they're pushing through a policy, they meet once a year. Then they have their 5-year plans, and then of course municipalities and provinces and autonomous regions, they also have their plans. But it's not a colossal waste of money. It's not donors' money that they're throwing in there. It's not so-and-so is going to have these lobbyists behind them. No, it's not like that at all. It's in fact people who belong to the Communist Party, which there are, I think over 100, maybe about 110 million belong to CPC members, something like that. Yeah. You have to think about that. You might say, well, that's 110 out of 1.5 billion. Well, of the 110 million, they're married, they have children, they have aunts, uncles, grandmas, grandmothers, cousins, and so on and so forth. So in fact, the country itself is connected in every single way. So it's really the voice of the collective country that is making the decisions. I mean, you're not going to go out there in the street here, especially in my city. I'm in a city of 32 million people, okay? There's roads all over the place. Yeah, they are not going to let nonsense run rampant in major cities in China. They hold the elected, and that's right, within the Communist Party, these elected members, they're accountable. And if they don't do a good job, they're out. It's as easy as that. I mean, imagine waking up in the morning and thinking, I've got to feed 1.5 billion people. Yeah. That's a hell of a responsibility. I don't think anybody would take that job, especially if, for the money that you make as a politician in this country. But anyway, on to the Julian Assange now. I want to read the audience of where this man, and he was too sick to actually show up at this latest court hearing. Now, this is a guy that has not been formally charged. The District of Virginia, the charges carry a maximum sentence of 170 years. So he is charged on 18 counts. We are seeing here conspiracy to attain and disclose national defense information, conspiracy to commit computer intrusions, obtaining national defense information, 7 counts, and disclosure of national defense information, 9 counts. In late 2020, a grand jury expanded the indictments against Assange. They said, broaden the scope of alleged computer intrusions, alleging that Assange recruited and conspired with hackers to encourage them to hack to get information for WikiLeaks. 18 counts later for a guy that basically told the truth. Thoughts, Cyrus?
Again, I mean, there's always this double standard. And what I think what we're seeing right now, Alex, is, similar with Edward Snowden, right? I mean, you go back and you see the information that he was exposing, and just the simple fact that, like, hey, this is something the American people should know about. And the US government said, no, I mean, we don't want that disclosed. And there's this kind of this interesting thing where, like, let's bring it back to the Huawei ban, right? We're told that, we're not allowed to have the most advanced 5G network, the most advanced telecommunications company in the world. They're not allowed to come into the United States, NATO, anywhere, because why? Because China's going to potentially go behind the back doors and actually listen to your conversation. Meanwhile, we know that this is exactly what the United States government is doing, right? We know that. I mean, it's and it's the same thing. I mean, even the report came out that the United States had tapped Angela Merkel's phones, and they had gone in and listened to everything that Merkel was doing in Germany. And so again, it's kind of like, we don't want Russia, China, anybody else to do this, because that would be like this is what they're trying to do. But it's like, well, actually, we do that as well. And I mean, it's interesting. It doesn't actually really bother me, because I don't really care what the U.S. government. It's not like I'm hiding anything, right? I have nothing to hide. I run my life with integrity. I don't do anything dishonest or dirty, so it's not like I'm worried about it. But it is, again, it is a difficult thing when you see the United States saying one thing and doing the other. And again, that is basically kind of our MO. That is what we do on the international stage. That is our foreign policy. And I think that is why you're seeing a tremendous amount of people around the world really looking at this case as a very big one. I mean, for Julian Assange, I mean, for him to be extradited, if he gets extradited back to the United States, I mean, I think there's a very high chance he's going to be, he's going to end up being dead in a prison. He's going to, not make it. I mean, his wife has been pleading that, saying, look, you cannot extradite him. That literally will kill him. And that's basically, I think it's just going to happen. I think unfortunately, this is the road that is going to happen. And once that does, you're going to see an international outcry from people around the world that are going to protest that. But unfortunately, it's going to, after a few months, people are going to forget, and it's just going to move on, and it's going to be business as usual. So, I mean, this is a big deal. This is a big case, and it's something that more people need to talk about. But again, it's just, in my mind, it is just another example of these double standards that we continue to set across the world. And if we continue to do that, it's very hard for us to have the credibility that we need on the international stage. And that is the bottom line.
Yeah, and people are asking, who is the next Assange? I mean, this is the difficult part. If we don't have these platforms to get the voice out, to talk to people, what are the other platforms available to us? I mean, there are other, parties and companies out there that are trying to open platforms. But, once again, we even see AI, algorithms now kind of wiping certain parts of history off of search engines. We're seeing them rewrite history. And this is very worrying. I've always said to my audience here, buy a set of encyclopedias on eBay if you can find them, put them in the basement, because those might be the last printed copies of, facts that are available. If you even go on Wikipedia, which is no connection with WikiLeaks, but if you go to Wikipedia, do you know that French history is rewritten over 400 times a day on Wikipedia? It's changed almost 400 times a day, and people can go in there, they can modify it, they can do whatever. But the Tucker Carlsons, I mean, once again, and I invite Tucker to come to China, have a sit down beside me here, and let's go to a grocery store together as well. Tucker, we can do that.
Yeah.
He is trying to get his message out. He has his experience in Russia, which was very interesting. And he's actually done a favor to the world, where I think by the time his interview with Putin will be done, it may eclipse 1 billion views, which is, 1/8 of the world's population. Kind of has a different insight on what's going on in that country. I've been to Russia as well. As soon as I left there, I said to people, wow, this is amazing. And,
Right.
Just because we have an opinion on countries that we travel to, and that we find that maybe there is a better life to, or maybe we move to it. I mean, surprisingly enough, and I think people that live in China will understand this, is, I left Canada. I lived in Europe. I lived in a very nice part of Europe for almost 2 decades in Monte Carlo. And I moved to Asia. I did some time in Thailand, enjoyed it. And then I came to China because I felt that this was a fascinating country that I wanted to discover. A country with over 600 cities, with over, I think, 100 of them with 1 million or more, and then 10 mega cities over the population of 10 million. I like big cities. I do.
Yeah.
I like big cities. I enjoy views like this. This is the view behind me here. No, maybe not. My camera's off, but let's bring it back. But this view behind me here, I've always wanted to sit in a view like this. Now, in other cities around the world, I can't do that. I went back and had a phone call with a friend of mine from Canada, and I said, remember that place I rented downtown? What's that renting out at right now? And he
Right.
says about $9,500 a month.
Yeah.
$9,500 a month to live in an apartment where I thought was not bad in Vancouver. Now here in China, why am I here? Standard of living. Laugh at it, you might, but standard of living. And this is why it's important that we have, reporters or investigative journalists like Julian Assange or the Edward Snowdens of the world here to unveil, pull back that cover and unravel the truth and let the people acknowledge it. I think if America ever does get a president that is open to taking some criticism and open to fixing things, well, that might be, an agenda that they can run on, saying, you know what, people, we actually want to tell you the truth.
Yeah.
And we're going to start today. Instead of sugarcoating it, saying, we got an amazing stock market. You know what I hear a lot, Cyrus? I hear a lot of people say to me, when the economy gets better in the United States, maybe we can work through these problems that we've had over the last few years. Listen, your world markets there, the S&P 500 just hit an all record high. If you're not either wealthy off the stock market or wealthy off your real estate market in that country, I tell you, if the economy goes into the tank here, whether it's third quarter, fourth quarter, or maybe first quarter next year, there's going to be a lot of stuff going on. And that's why, once again, this court case is so important, because Julian Assange has basically said, here's what your government is wasting money on. Here is their narrative. This is the blueprint. And the blueprint's out. It's out there for everybody to see. And some people, they don't want to see it. They just say, well, the guy deserves to go to jail, or he leaks state secrets. I mean, they didn't tell us the truth to begin with. So here's a guy that decides to put his neck on the line. And I don't know, do you think Julian Assange ever thought that he would spend pretty much, I would say, already 10 years, maybe more, under house arrest? I can't imagine 7 years in an Ecuadorian consulate in England, not allowed to step foot on the pavement for 7 years, was healthy at all. I mean, do you think this guy really thought that this was going to happen to him?
I would imagine that there's got to be some calculated risks there. I mean, I think he would have definitely thought there's a potential for that, because of just how, again, I mean, there's a quote in here from the live stream, from Perceived Reality. When exposing a crime is treated as committing a crime, you're being ruled by criminals, Edward Snowden. I mean, there's definitely, we definitely know that. And I mean, you can't speak out too much. I mean, especially at this level. I mean, when you look at someone like an Edward Snowden or Julian Assange, I mean, these guys, when they're doing that, I mean, I think like Edward Snowden would have definitely known that. But he felt that is his right as an American citizen to do that. And so again, it's if you're going to go down that road and you're going to do that, I think so, Alex. I think the answer is yes. But maybe he's looking at it like, look, I'm doing this for the greater impact that this could potentially lead to, or at least I'm going to dedicate my life to going down this road and doing that. So I think it's I mean, it's a really important case. I think this has obviously become his life goal, but it's going to be another one of these things where eventually whatever happens to Julian Assange, I mean, let's just be, very realistic here. I mean, I don't think that he's not going to get his due process. He's not going to get his freedom, from this. I mean, he's going to eventually be a martyr. I mean, I think I'll go ahead and make that, because, this is just not what the U.S. government is going to want to allow. And I think what's going to happen is it's going to be very similar to that Yugoslavia incident that you mentioned earlier in the stream, when you said, this was what I was told in, growing up, and when I was watching that on the TV, that, hey, the United States is coming in here to liberate these people, and this is what's going to happen. This NATO war is what needs to be fought. But, we're seeing these massive mistakes. And it's kind of the same thing, Alex, when you look at the Iraq war and the weapons of mass destruction. And, that is almost glossed over at this point in American history, where it's like, you know what, we made a mistake. Sorry about that. It's such a casual thing now because we're 20 years removed, and eventually, that saying goes, time heals all wounds. People eventually forget. Our lives get busy. Life does move on. And so the issue with that is that, again, this is these double standards that I talk about when, for example, this is what China and Russia are saying. Look, hey, what about you guys starting, the Iraq war? And, there's always this thing of, we made a mistake, sorry about that, but it's just like, hey, we have started more wars. And I think what we've seen is there was an amazing statistic where, there's a new, I think it was in foreign policy. It said, how primed is China for war? And it basically had portrayed China as, okay, this is this aggressive force that is building up a military and is literally going to attack at any second now. And it's like, it's going to take every bit of credibility, every bit of, patience and virtue by the United States to be the bigger player here and act responsibly. And it's like, really? Like China, who hasn't as much fired a bullet on foreign soil in 45 years, hasn't been involved in no conflicts of any kind. You're gonna portray them as the evil, aggressive one. Meanwhile, the United States, who has been involved in 13 different wars since in the 21st century alone, the vast majority of which we have caused or been a direct result of, we're the innocent one that's the big player that's supposed to have the moral high superiority here. There's a big disconnect there. And again, I mean, we look at what's going on the international stage. It's just fascinating, what is going on. I mean, as you know, I went to Turkey earlier last year in November, and I was very interested to go to that part of the world to see how Americans were perceived, to see this conflict, from people in Turkey. What is people in Turkey? What do you think about the war that's going on between Israel and Palestine right now? Of course, Gaza, which is just being absolutely demolished. Any future chance of life in Gaza is quickly being exterminated. And most of the people in Turkey were like, yeah, I mean, we're not happy with what the United States is doing, that you are supporting this, that you are, giving, incredible amount of arms and bombs to Israel to continue this bombardment. And it's sad because if you go back to the, Ottoman Empire, we used to rule that land, right? So, I mean, we want to see a land where there was peace, and we want to see peace in that region. Obviously, it's very close, Palestine, Israel, very close to Turkey, just across the water there. So, that's something that's on the hearts and minds of many Turkish people. And, again, it's kind of, we have an interesting thing with the United States on the international stage when you go abroad, because I think most people around the world have a very good perception of Americans. I've never been mistreated anywhere that I've been in the world. I've never had people be mad at me, but I've had a lot of people around the world tell me, I like you because you're an American, and I know that you don't have any connections to your government. It's not your responsibility, but I'm not a fan of your government. And I'll be very clear with you. I'm not a fan of how they work. And there was true, actually, back in 2008, I did go to South Korea. And at the time I had shaved my head, and I actually had many people thought I was U.S. Army, tall white American guy with a shaved head and, walking around in Seoul. Most people would think you're U.S. Army. And there were certain restaurants and bars, Alex, that I had a trouble getting into because they had told me, you're U.S. Army, you're not allowed in. And I said, no, I'm not. I'm just American. And they're like, oh, okay, then you can come in. And that was the reputation of what was happening over there. And it was, a lot of it was because there's so many U.S. Army. It's actually a tremendous amount of U.S. Army guys in Seoul, but a lot of those guys got into bar fights and things like that. So they just said, hey, we're going to start banning U.S. American Army boys because you guys are out of control. That was more that situation there. But again, I think Americans generally are perceived very well on the international stage, but our U.S. government, they're very different story. And that's something that most Americans don't know. Why? Because here in America, we live in a bubble. We live in a bubble that most people just do not see. They don't understand. And that is the truth.
Back to the Assange case here. I'm just going to bring something up so that I can just let people understand the take. What will happen to the Julian Assange if he is extradited? court in London is deciding if WikiLeaks founder Julian Assange can appeal against his extradition case to the United States. This is pretty much the last chance for him. I mean, he can put his faith in the European courts of human rights, but I don't think that's really going to do much for him. Stella Assange is now waiting for a decision on the extradition of her husband, Julian, the founder of WikiLeaks, from the United Kingdom to the United States. First of all, this rings alarm bells like the Meng Wanzhou case that happened, where Canada decided to nab, Huawei's one of Huawei's top leaders of the company, and get her midway on her way to another country in a transfer region of an airport. Meng Wanzhou, we had a lawyer on here that program that day. I believe his name was, do you remember his name?
Richard something.
Richard Kerr, something like that.
Richard
anyway,
Curlin.
Curlin, yeah, thank you for that. So this is another case where the lapdog, United Kingdom, is deciding, okay, yeah, let's hold this guy. No charges, by the way. And they know his health is decreasing by the day. And I have a bad feeling about this. I have a real bad feeling that this is going to go terribly wrong fast. And it already is. Now, what will happen? Basically, what most of the mainstream media news outlets are saying, depending on whose side they're taking, but most agree that it's not going to be good news. And here's the thing: you spoke, you were talking earlier about your experience in Turkey, and talking to people about money being spent in the Middle East and stuff like that, and between this Palestine and Israel situation. Well, who is going to blow the whistle here on the real truth on what's going on in Ukraine? Tell us, guys. Tell us, media. Tell me anyone in the United States government or any of these governments that are funding this war, how many Ukrainian boys' lives have been killed? Give me a body count. Tell me, is it 100,000? Is it 500,000? Is it 800,000? Is it 1 million? That interview that, Vladimir Putin did with Tucker Carlson, the follow-up to that with Medvedev that came on the Twitter just the other day, I said, we're being pushed so hard. We've told you that we'd like to sit down. We think we can find a way out of this. What happens? Another 60 billion gets approved. Another 60 billion gets approved. More money, more bodies, more fatalities, more broken families, more broken futures for these poor nations. Throw them to the front line. Well, the front line gets wiped out. There was major victory just the other day with the Russians that, conquered more territory. Medvedev basically said very clearly, you know what? If you keep pushing, maybe we'll take it all the way to Kiev this time.
Yeah.
Maybe we'll do that. And this is, the sacrifice, and we need to get to the truth here. Where's the money going? We won't find out. How much went? We can't find out. How many bodies are dying and how many people are dying by the day, by the hour, by the minute? We won't find out. And it takes someone to tell the truth. And I feel it that somewhere, whether it's in the United States, whether it's in the national security, there is another Julian Assange there. There is another Edward Snowden ready to just unload. And this could be the worry. This could be the worry for the government. Maybe they're just saying, hey, look what we're going to do to you if you unload and release this kind of stuff. We're going to throw you in jail, or we're going to extradite you to the United States and throw away the key for 170 years. If this is a deterrent, I don't know, Cyrus, your thoughts on that?
I agree. I mean, Alex, I really think the issue is right now is that, they're, to use a football analogy, this is like a Hail Mary throw. Hail Mary is the last throw of the game that you try to win it on. And, it's a desperation attempt. But vast majority of Hail Mary passes don't work. Very oddly, very rarely that they do. But I just think that when you look at, the United States has a tremendous amount of control over this, right? I mean, you go back to the Meng Wanzhou case. Canada was forced to do that. I mean, there is a extradition treaty, where certainly, Canada had to do that. But they had to arrest Meng Wanzhou originally, because of that. But the way that the court cases came in, and I think, again, this goes down to the leadership of Justin Trudeau. When you look at that, and, in Canada's law, there is a stipulation that, the prime minister can override that and can simply say, look, we're not going to do that. And I can step in and I can end this drama right now. We don't want to put our country in this situation like that. And I think that, every country has, that kind of line in their constitution or their set of laws that allow them to have that flexibility. As far as this, I just think this is going to be, I'm very pessimistic about this. I mean, obviously I would like to see, democracy and, absolutely, his right to a fair trial, all of these things. I mean, but the reality is that this guy is now publicly, and I mean, number one, along with Edward Snowden, I mean, Edward Snowden's never going to leave Russia, right? I mean, he can never leave that country, in fears of his life. And so I think this is going to basically, he's going to go down as a martyr. I think really that's just the reality of what's going to happen. I think he knows that. I think his wife knows that. I think that, again, this is just going to have to be, this is going to be a case where people are going to say, hey, what about this? Because it's the same thing when we talk about, people are like, well, the U.S. government's doing this. Well, what about it? What about Edward Snowden? What about Snowden? And it's just become kind of this one case, and it's something similar to that, Michael Pompeo quote, it's gonna live on, and it's just basically going to be.
I think I got it as a voice clip here. Is this it?
I was the CIA director. We lied, we cheated, we stole. It was like we had entire training courses.
Yeah,
that applause is creepy.
It is very creepy. But actually, I want to share with you something very interesting. I don't think you're aware of this.
Tell me.
I want to show you, because you talked about something very interesting as far as AI and how things are changing and how history is being rewritten. So the biggest event of the year every year in America is the Super Bowl. Okay, National Football League. This is American football, the championship game. This past Super Bowl was the most viewed event in United States television history. Okay, there was over 130 million Americans that tuned in to watch the Super Bowl. Again, this is the #1 TV program of all time in the United States. At the halftime show, all right, there's always a big performance, a musical artist. And this year there was Usher, but he was joined by Alicia Keys. Now, Alicia Keys, very great voice. As soon as she came out and sang her song, the first note that she hit, her voice crackled. Okay, her voice crackled, and it was a noticeable mistake. Okay, and it was kind of but as a performer, she immediately just kept singing, and eventually got into her song and did great. But the very first note that she played, her voice crackled, and it was a very obvious mistake that she had made. Wow. Now, what was interesting is that I actually follow the NFL on WeChat. So the NFL is active on WeChat. Within, I'm going to say, an hour, they had that halftime show available on WeChat. Okay, it's on WeChat. Okay, and the version that you have on there is the original one. I can send it to you right now. We could play it right now. We should have loaded that up ahead. But basically, you have that crackle in the voice. Right now, okay, now it took about 24 hours for that version to be uploaded on YouTube. And amazingly, when she hits that first note, it's been corrected. Okay, it has been completely corrected.
Oh boy.
And there was a whole thread on this on Twitter that, okay, a lot of people might say, okay, Cyrus, what's the big deal? Right? It's a Super Bowl halftime show. It is, who gives a crap? It's one little note. She missed it. They corrected it. There you go. The issue, and this is what the author of this Twitter thread wrote, and I thought it was very brilliant, is the fact that all we're going to see now, right? If you search for Super Bowl halftime show on YouTube, you cannot find the original version. YouTube is delisting and is deleting all of those other versions. If you have the original version, for example, if I download that and I, upload that there, YouTube is scrubbing those, and they are only having the preferred one, right? Because now it's all copyrighted, right? You can't upload that because that's, that is owned by Apple Music, that halftime show. So any type of upload would be copyrighted, right? So you can't upload the original version. They have the new version, and that is the original one. What's going to happen here? Again, this is a small thing. I mean, many people might be thinking, Cyrus, you're making a mountain out of an anthill. The reality is, though, is that within a couple of months, no one is going to remember the fact that during that live show, she missed that note. They're going to have this sound clip. It's like, wow, Alicia Keys did amazing. She nailed it. She did a perfect performance. And again, and it's not me slamming her as an artist. It's just simply saying that's not what happened. And what's happening is that this is dangerous because it leads us down a road where in the future, things are being changed. AI is being introduced. This is a dangerous thing. Another YouTuber that we like, Johnny Harris, who makes some great videos. He did a whole thing where, he has a video and, it's basically he used this AI to self-generate himself. And it's like, this is dangerous because what if somebody else, you got a YouTube channel of 6 million followers. What if somebody takes that image and uses AI and then now puts out a new video? And it's like, wow, we're going to quote you saying this. We're living in a very interesting time right now. And I actually have I got about a 30-minute video going out tomorrow talking about artificial intelligence, talking about that's the war right now between the US and China. That's the future war is AI. And I have a full breakdown of this. It's quite an amazing deep dive. It's going to debut tomorrow in basically about 24 hours. So I'm excited to share that video. But this is an interesting one, Alex. What do you think about that story with the Super Bowl?
It doesn't surprise me. I've dabbled in AI. I just put out a video called Planet Chongqing. And just to let the viewers know what I mean by Planet Chongqing here, I'm going to give you a live view. And just to some of the people that like to take some shots at China, this is my live view. Can't seem to get it on the screen here. Here it is here. This is a live view behind me. This is Chongqing City at 32 million. No, there's no AI used in showing this. This is the city center of it right now.
What a city, buddy. I'm going to get there this year.
I'm looking forward to you coming here. But if you haven't visited the city before, it's amazing city. It is considered one of China's cyberpunk cities. So you will probably see some AI made of it. But no, that is what that baby looks like behind me there. But anyway, you asked me about AI. Here's the good and the bad. AI, if people are jumping to conclusions that AI is going to replace everything, there is some truth to certain ways of AI that is good for us. Some could it be like I have driven a lot of vehicles lately, and there's systems of predicting, seeing a car, that is far ahead of you that you can't see in the fog. You can see on an internal screen. So there is some safety aspects to it, to helping out. Also, with information, depending on how you use it, it can help you maybe make contracts a little bit easier. But AI is what we put into it. That's the thing. The scary part about it is how far are these computers going to take it? Are they going to take it to the limit where we're not sure if we're talking to an actual human being or a robot or customer service? It could harm. And that's the danger, is a lot of boardrooms around the world are basically saying, let's rush into it. I'm a guy that's been through the dot-com bomb. Boom. I'm going to call it a bomb now, but it was a dot-com boom. I saw many companies that that's going to be it. It's going to be massively changed. Well, about 95% of those companies went under. Yeah. And we see, as we get further to this AI, I used some new software called Sora last week. I had a few days to take a peek at it only. Okay. I've used some other software stuff. Now, you got to remember, a lot of these companies are in their IPO stage or seed capital raising stage. So, the world might be amazed by 10 videos put on a site saying, hey, we generated these 10-second clips on AI. Is it going to revolutionize the world? When you start asking the questions and you look at a lot of these components, a lot of the major consumers like me and you are not going to get firsthand use of these products. In fact, companies like Disney, they'll probably get the animated, real good AGI generated stuff first.
Right.
Now, are they going to release that into the market? In a few years' time, possibly. From a consumer standpoint, possibly. And, you made that point about Alicia Keys singing on stage. Well, a lot of us music lovers out there, everybody's probably heard of the Beatles before. Well, the Beatles are still popular because they're the Beatles, and they have music that they created. They're thoughtful minds, creative minds. If we stop putting into AI, it runs out of information. And, you know, when you look at, you can take any sector, whether it's video editing, recording artists. Sure, I mean, there's algorithms out there that can make some music, but when you think about it, the business model of the music industry has massively changed since, you know, the digitizing of these catalogs. Everybody said, that's it. Musicians aren't going to make any money because they can't make money selling CDs anymore. Do you remember that? I don't know if you remember that.
No, for sure.
Oh, that's it. After the boy bands, Backstreet Boys and Britney Spears, no one can make money now that the MP3's here. I used to download at a very young age on the internet and used a program called Napster.
Yeah.
Napster was wide open. You could download what people used to download or used to purchase over 10 years. You could download that in about 15 minutes.
Yeah.
And that's the consumer. That changes the consumers. You know, how do they buy music? I remember when my father used to buy a vinyl record and come home and say, hey, there's 8 great songs. Now it's spread out, maybe 1 or 2 songs on a, I guess they still call them albums, but, you know, digital album. Maybe there's 1 or 2 good songs. My point is that at the end of the day, it really comes down to humans and human interaction. If music could not be made by selling compact discs, well, I'll tell you, it's all the way down to the artist. And, well, Taylor Swift seemed to make a little bit of cash last year on her tours. She hardly made any money on her album. Yeah. And that's why I'm saying we might find things to replace certain things. Like if you ask me back in the early 90s, could you have a phone that takes photos? Well, I would say, what are you talking about? Right. Cameras today, even though the cameras are on the phones. I mean, yeah, some of the dinosaurs like Kodak and that, they go out of business, but they reinvent themselves. But it's all down to human nature. And I really think there are pros and cons to AI. And I think companies that are looking to replace their staff or whether it's in studios around the world or whatever, think again, because you might be letting the most creative minds walk out of your boardroom where you think that you have a nifty word like AI replacing them. And I think it's a bit dangerous that way, Cyrus.
Yeah, no, I agree, Alex. I mean, it's something that we should be very aware of, and it's definitely going to be shifting the future of you know, geopolitics around the world and kind of the future of our world. I mean, it's kind of it's going to be the next big thing. I'm excited to you know, to talk about it more tomorrow in tomorrow's video. And Alex, let's kind of wrap this up. Let's kind of have our closing comments on here. I want to ask you a question. What do you think is going to happen to Julian Assange if you had to be looking to your crystal ball? If you had to make a prediction, I'm gonna put you on the spot. Like, how do you feel it's going to transpire, and what's going to happen?
Well, I just read the latest headline that it's going to take. They're going to go into next month to come up with a decision. My fear is his health more than what is going to happen to him. I really think that this is a very sick man who has some serious health problems. What in the hell is he doing in a prison in the United Kingdom? Come on, let this man have some decency. Let this man live, you know, whether it's the last few weeks or months of his life, you know, show some bloody mercy. Drop DOJ, drop the charges. Yeah. Let this man, you've done it. You've made your point. You've pretty much killed a man. And I can't really say anything like, you know, do I hope that he shouldn't even be there to begin with. So there shouldn't be any, do I hope he doesn't get extradited. Let the man go. I mean, the world's watching. The world's watching. That's my thoughts.
Yeah, fair enough. I think I conclude. I agree. I mean, I think it's an important one. And again, you know, my final word here is, you know, very similar to how we talked about with this Jimmy Lai. If you haven't watched it, I made a video about Jimmy Lai. This is a man, the title of this video is very interesting. It's, you know, how one man almost convinced the United States to destroy a city of 7 million people. And that is an important video because we're seeing these double standards. You know, we're seeing, you know, a guy like Jimmy Lai that is being paraded around by the United States government as this innocent and free man when he actually, you know, colluded with foreign governments to try to basically destroy a Chinese city. I mean, that is a grave crime, but we want to give him, you know, this freedom. You know, we want to give him all of the, you know, basically treat him like some saint that he's not. And I mean, we've even had U.S. senators that have nominated him for a Nobel Peace Prize. Meanwhile, he is, you know, right in right in the fold, but but again, it goes down to that issue is that, he's colluding with the U.S. government to help overthrow an adversary. And, that's why he's perceived in a positive light. And on the flip side, when you have Julian Assange, who has said, hey, look, this is what's actually really going on, you're now an enemy of the state. And I think that comment from George Galloway was really spot on. You thought Enemy of the State was a movie starring Will Smith back in the early 2000s. No, that's actually called real life, and it happens in real life. And that it's just where do you fall on the line? And again, I think going back to being a patriotic American, somebody that wants to see the United States succeed, somebody that does love the United States. If we're going to improve our reputation on the international stage, it comes with integrity and it comes with having standards and being consistent. I don't think you can find a more double standard, but when you're looking at, we're saying one thing, for example, Russia has invaded Ukraine. This is an illegal occupation. We need to, we need to support Ukraine. Let's send them billions of dollars to fight off Russia in this illegal invasion. Meanwhile, on the flip side, we are saying we are basically enabling Israel to do an illegal occupation in Gaza and to, and what the ICJ has plausibly ruled as a genocide. So again, when you are conflicting yourself, it is basically two opposite sides of the spectrum there in your support for Ukraine and your support for Israel. There is no consistency. There is no consistency there. And it is an atrocity what is happening in Gaza. I stand firmly against it. It's unbelievable. And it really pains me, Alex, because right now it's tax season in the United States, and I'm paying my taxes as a United States citizen because that's my, I have to. But it pains me that my taxes are going to fund wars like this but I have no other option. As an American citizen, I'm also taxed on worldwide income, so it's not like I can move outside of the country and not pay taxes back to the United States. But it's sad when you have, again, it goes back to that thing of look at the plethora of problems we have inside of this country. Why are we funding these wars across the world? Why are we maintaining 800 military bases around the world when, for example, our schools are not protected, and the border's not protected? I mean, there's a lot more things that we can be doing here. We're going to continue talking about this, Alex, because we have a very important election. I'm sure we're going to talk about more on that as this, continues to churn on. But I want to thank everybody that spent their time here today, because you could have been anywhere in the world and you decided to spend it with us here on YouTube. So very thankful for that. Alex, thank you. As always, Let's do it some more. Let's get back in our routine and do some more live streams. Always enjoy chatting with you.
Sounds good. We'll put on some image there and we'll see you guys in the chat column. Take care. All right. Have a great evening. Bye-bye.